Law there is a verse in Genesis 6:4 that most people read and move past without stopping. There were giants in the earth in those days. Everyone knows it. Sunday school knows it. You have heard it. You moved on. Stop there. The word is not giants. That is not what the Hebrew says. The word is Nephilim. And that word comes from naphal, to fall. The Nephilim are not named for their height. They are named for a verdict. They are the fallen ones, or more precisely, those who cause others to fall. That is not a measurement. That is a judgment baked into the name before the story even begins. And here is the fact that plants this conversation in something older and stranger than a Sunday school flannel board. The oldest church in the world, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which has kept a canon the Western Church discarded, still teaches that the demons it casts out in the name of Christ are what was left of these creatures when the flood receded. Not metaphor, not folklore, doctrine, 1700 years of it. That is where this story begins. We are going to move through 5 chapters of this account. First, who the sons of God really were. Second, the account Genesis refused to tell, the book that was cut, found in Dead Sea Scroll fragments, preserved whole only in the Ethiopian canon. Third, the giants who survived a flood designed specifically to erase them. Fourth, what the church fathers said their spirits became, and why that answer dominated Christian theology for over 16 centuries. And fifth, the one verse in Matthew that convinces millions this story is not finished. The question the Nephilim leave behind is not about monsters. It is about what you stop noticing, about the line you are already standing in front of, feeling nothing on an ordinary afternoon. Let's begin at the beginning. Genesis 6:1-4. The sons of God, in Hebrew Beni Elohim, looked at the daughters of men and took them as wives. Their children became the Nephilim, called Gibborim in that same passage. Mighty men, men of renown. Notice what the text does not give you. No height, no measurement, no towers, no skulls. The size mythology came later. What Genesis actually names is a boundary violation, not a body type. A line God drew between heaven and earth, crossed from above. 5 major scholarly readings have been proposed and argued across centuries. The fallen angels literally taking human form. The righteous line of Seth marrying the unrighteous line of Cain, a Sethite reading that became dominant after Augustine. Elite human rulers, legendary kings whose couplings with ordinary women produced warrior dynasties. A literary polemic against Mesopotamian epics, counter-narrative, not history. And Hebrew awe at Canaanite megalithic construction, walls 18 feet thick, structures that seemed to require a race of builders that no longer existed. All 5 have serious scholarly defenders. One carried 2,000 years of mainstream Christian interpretation. The fallen angels, the cosmic violation. Beings who belonged to heaven, choosing the earth, crossing a line that was never theirs to cross. That is not the only reading, but it is the one that shaped everything that followed. The Book of Enoch, First Enoch, the Book of Watchers, did not make the Western canon, but it was not forgotten. Dead Sea Scroll fragments preserve parts of it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church kept it whole as scripture for more than 1,600 years, and what it describes is a world that Genesis 6 only gestures toward. 200 angels. Not one rogue figure, 200. They are called the Watchers. Their leader is Semiaza. Their chief executor is Azazel. According to First Enoch, they descend in the days of Jared. Jared, the father of Enoch, 6 generations from Adam, and from their unions with human women come the Nephilim. The Watchers understood what they were doing. The text does not frame this as accident or confusion. They made an oath to one another before they descended. They knew the covenant they were breaking. They did it anyway. But the Nephilim were not the only product of that descent. The Watchers taught. Azazel taught the making of blades, swords, shields, the instruments of war passed from a celestial being into human hands. He also taught the painting of the face, cosmetics, the manipulation of appearance, beauty as deception. Other Watchers taught sorcery, astrology, the reading of stars for divination. And one, a Watcher named Penemu, taught the art of writing with ink and paper. Stop there. Writing. The transmission of knowledge that outlives its teacher. What the Watchers gave humanity was not merely corruption in the moment. It was a mechanism by which corruption could perpetuate itself across generations. Genesis 6:11 arrives then with the weight of consequence. The earth was filled with violence, not as surprise. As a result, the Nephilim consumed the harvest first. Then when that was gone, they turned to the herds. And when the herds ran out, the text in 1 Enoch is deliberate and unflinching about the sequence. They began to devour men. And when there were not enough men, they devoured one another. The hunger did not end when the food did. That line needs to sit for a moment. The hunger did not end when the food did. This is not warfare. This is not conquest. This is a civilization-wide moral inversion. The total collapse of every boundary between what a living thing was permitted to consume and what it was not. The Nephilim did not become cannibals because they were cruel. They became cannibals because they were something the earth had no category for. Half of heaven, half of earth, bound by appetites that nothing in the natural world could satisfy. 4 archangels moved against what had been made. Uriel warned Noah. Michael bound Semiaza and the other watcher chiefs in chains. Raphael bound Azazel, the teacher of blades and deception, and buried him under stones in the desert. Gabriel was sent to the Nephilim themselves, and then the flood came. This is not weather, let that settle. The flood described in Genesis and elaborated in 1 Enoch is not a climate event. It is a surgical act of erasure aimed at one specific bloodline. The waters were the sentence. The sentence was meant to be final. Numbers 13:33. The spies Moses sent into Canaan return with their report. We saw the Nephilim there, and we seemed like grasshoppers in our own sight, and we seemed like grasshoppers to them. The flood was supposed to be the end. It wasn't. And embedded in that verse are 3 words that biblical scholars have been working around for centuries, and also afterward. Genesis 6:4 had already said it. Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man. The phrase is there before the flood even arrives. The text itself leaves a door open. How are they back? The flood was built to erase them. Multiple explanations have been proposed. A second angelic descent after the flood, a Nephilim bloodline that survived inside Noah's family, the label expanding to cover any warrior class that struck awe in the people it faced. No explanation is universally accepted. What is universally clear? The flood was supposed to be the end. It wasn't. The Anakim, Ahiman, Sheshai, Talmai, the descendants of Anak named in those reports from Canaan, the Rephaim referenced in more than 20 biblical passages, and among the Rephaim, the most precisely documented giant in all of Scripture, Og, king of Bashan, Deuteronomy 3:11. His iron bed was 9 cubits long, roughly 13 feet. The text preserves the measurement because it was, evidently, the kind of number you recorded so people believed you. And then Goliath. Goliath of Gath, whom nearly everyone calls a Nephilim and almost no one checks. 2 Samuel 21, Goliath is there along with 3 others, Lami, Saph, Ishbi-Benob. All 4 are sons of the Rephaim. The text does not call Goliath a Nephilim, it calls him Rephaim. That distinction matters. He is inheritance, what the giant bloodlines became as they moved down through generations and conquest, and the slow diminishment of something that had once been cosmic in scale. Not the original crossing, not the original transgression. Joshua 11:21 through 22. Joshua hunts the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, from all the hill country of Judah and Israel. He leaves none remaining. Only in Gaza, in Gath, in Ashdod, a few survive. The giants do not end all at once. They diminish, they retreat. They become a remnant of something that once called down angels to destroy it. And that should have been the end of it. The bodies were the easy part. If you come here for the old stories taken seriously, read the way they were actually written, not the way they were softened for Sunday school. Subscribe and hit the bell, because what the early church said happened to these creatures after they died is the part most people have never been told. For those who ask whether any of this left a mark on the physical world, there is a long history of claims, and most of them are wreckage. The 1897 New York Times account of a 9-foot skeleton, the 1895 San Diego mummy, allegedly 8 feet and 4 inches, allegedly purchased by the Smithsonian, then gone from the records. Lovelock Cave in Nevada, reports from newspapers across a century that carried all the authority of print and none of the scrutiny of excavation. The Cardiff Giant, carved from gypsum in 1869, buried, then dug up as a petrified ancient man, a deliberate hoax. The 1577 Lucerne Giant, later confirmed as mammoth remains. The 1705 Albany Giant, mastodon bones misidentified. The bones are a hoax, we can say that plainly. The Smithsonian cover-up has no verification in any institutional record. Modern anthropology has found no skeletal evidence of abnormally large human populations in the ancient Near East. The Biblical Archaeology Society is unambiguous. The historical reports consistently involved misidentified animal remains. But here is what is not a hoax. Gilgal Rephaim, 5 concentric rings of stone on the Golan Heights, astronomically aligned to the solstices, its central chamber oriented with precision. It sits in the region the Bible calls Bashan, the territory of Og, the territory of the Rephaim. It was built by someone. The identity of its builders is unknown. Archaeologists have studied it. No one has answered who built it or why. The giants in the museums are fakes. The thing the giants were blamed for is still standing. 1 Enoch 15 asks a question that Genesis does not. When a being that is half of heaven and half of earth dies, what happens to its spirit? A fully human spirit belongs to Sheol. A fully angelic spirit belongs to the heavenlies. But the Nephilim were neither. Their bodies were destroyed in the flood. Their spirits, being half celestial, could not dissolve. Being half earthly, they could not return to the divine realm. They were ontologically homeless. Neither world would take them. 1 Enoch 15's answer shaped the next 16 centuries of Christian demonology. Their spirits became demons, disembodied, eternally hungry, belonging nowhere, wandering. And this was not a fringe view. This was the mainstream view. For over 1600 years, Justin Martyr, writing in the 2nd century, stated plainly, "The demons are called by men of them that were born of the giants." Athenagoras of Athens. The souls of the giants are the demons who wander about the world. Irenaeus held it. Tertullian held it. This was not a footnote in early Christian thought. It was the answer. The demons in the Gospels on this reading are not fallen angels. They are the homeless ghosts of the Nephilim, still starving, still hunting bodies. Mark 5:12. The legion of demons inside the man among the tombs, begging Christ, "Send us into the pigs, let us enter them." They do not ask to be freed. They do not ask to be at rest. They ask for a body, any body, even a pig's body. Luke 11:24. The unclean spirit cast out, wandering through waterless places, seeking rest, finding none, returning. The hunger does not end when the body does. And then the Book of Jubilees 10 adds the detail that makes this present tense. When the flood receded and the bodies were gone, God permitted the binding of the demonic spirits. All but 1 in 10, approximately 10%, were allowed to remain, to test the hearts of men. They were never gone. The flood took their bodies. It was allowed to leave their hunger. The flood was supposed to be the end. The bodies were dealt with. The spirits were not. Matthew 24:37. Jesus, speaking to his disciples on the Mount of Olives, says, "For as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Prophecy teachers have built substantial doctrine around this sentence. The days of Noah were the days of the Nephilim, the Watchers, angel-human hybridization. And so, as it was in the days of Noah, must mean a return of Nephilim-like entities, through genetic engineering, through transhumanism, through what some teachers call alien abduction, as a modern echo of Genesis 6. But Michael Heiser, a scholar of ancient Near Eastern languages, reads what Jesus actually says. Matthew 24:38 and 39 does not mention giants. It does not mention the sons of God. Jesus names 4 activities that characterize the days before the flood: eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage. Ordinary life, uninterrupted, continuing all the way to the day Noah entered the ark. Jesus names no Nephilim. His point, Heiser argues, is about societal response to warning. The catastrophe arrived on an ordinary afternoon. No one looked up. The prophecy teachers have constructed a doctrine on speculative ground, Heiser concludes, grafting apocryphal lore onto a text that Jesus did not write that way. Both readings remain live. No major denomination has issued an official position. The ambiguity sustains both. and the interpretation requiring greater vigilance tends to spread. But here is what stays when the debate recedes. The Nephilim story has always been about a line between what is ours to touch and what is not, between the realm we inhabit and the realm that was sealed away from us. A people who crossed that line did not believe, at the moment of crossing, that anything would happen. The watchers swore an oath before they descended, and the oath is in the text not as evidence that someone stopped them, but as evidence that they knew what they were doing and chose it anyway. The days of Noah were not terrifying because of what the giants did to the world. The days of Noah were terrifying because it was an ordinary afternoon and no one looked up. So here is the question the Nephilim story leaves standing, not about them, about you. What are you in the middle of crossing right now that still feels completely normal? This is what we do here. We do not treat the old stories as superstition to laugh at or as scripture to be afraid of. We read them as the most serious things a civilization ever wrote down about itself. The weight ancient writers put into these texts, the precision of the names, the structure of the judgments, the care of the genealogies was not accident. It was record. It was warning. It was the attempt to pass something on. Subscribe because we are just getting started.